People often say you can learn a lot about someone based on how they treat the cleaning staff. Yet no one gave a second thought when Martha Davis, dressed in a worn uniform and pushing a cleaning cart, quietly entered the spotless offices of Summit Enterprises in the heart of downtown Orlando. With her hair tied back, head down, and hands roughened by years of labor, she was practically invisible to the executives in their designer clothes and shiny shoes. To them, she was just another worker dealing with their mess. What they didn't realize was that Martha was on the verge of shaking things up. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. It was just an ordinary Thursday when Brian Peterson, one of the top executives, sneered at her while she wiped the boardroom's glass windows. "Make sure you don't leave any streaks this time, all right? Some of us have important meetings," he said with a smug smile, barely acknowledging her presence. His colleagues chuckled. Martha, as always, stayed silent and kept working. Little did Brian know, his laughter was about to end his career. As the hours passed, employees came and went, treating Martha like she was a fixture in the room, not a human being. They gossiped about her, made jokes behind her back, and dismissed her with a flick of their hands if she was in the way. No one realized who she truly was. No one, except for one woman, Rachel Lopez, a recent business school graduate and new hire. She noticed how everyone treated Martha, but something didn't sit right with her. She had seen Martha walk through the office halls with quiet confidence, her eyes sharp and observant, as if watching more than just the dust on the floors. Then, on that fateful afternoon, everything unraveled. The company's CEO had flown in from New York for a highly anticipated annual review meeting. He was the man everyone respected, feared, and admired. William Sanders, the ruthless leader who had taken Summit Enterprises to the top of the corporate world. The air was tense as he entered the boardroom, the room falling silent as he stood at the head of the table. But then something unexpected happened. William glanced at Martha, standing quietly in the corner with her cleaning supplies in hand. For a brief moment, the room seemed to freeze. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. "Martha," he said warmly, "I think it's time, don't you?" The board members exchanged confused glances. Brian Peterson, who had mocked her earlier, sat frozen, his arrogant smirk fading. Martha calmly put down the rag she had been holding, her movements deliberate. She took a deep breath and turned to face the stunned executives. "Yes, Mr. Sanders," she said, with the same quiet authority that had been hidden beneath the surface all along. As she walked to the front of the room, a wave of confusion and disbelief rippled through the crowd. Rachel's heart raced, realizing something monumental was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," William Sanders continued, "I'd like to introduce you to Summit's majority shareholder, Martha Davis." The room erupted in gasps. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and silence blanketed the once arrogant group of executives. Brian Peterson sat motionless, his face drained of color. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Martha stood tall now, commanding the room in a way no one had expected. "For years," she began, her voice steady and calm, "I've watched how this company operates from the inside, not from behind a desk, but from the floors you walk on, the hallways you pass through, and the offices you leave in disarray. What I've seen is a culture that lacks respect, that values profits over people. But today, that changes." The transformation in Martha was unmistakable. No longer the quiet cleaning lady, she was now the powerful force behind the company, a woman who had built herself up from nothing and now owned the very empire they all worked for. "From this day forward," she continued, locking eyes with each executive, "things will be different. I'm not just cleaning up your messes anymore. I'm cleaning up this company." Rachel, standing in the back, couldn't help but smile. Martha had been the invisible force all along, and now she was about to make her mark in a way no one would ever forget. As Martha finished her speech, the truth settled in. They had scorned her, belittled her, and mocked her, but they had never really known her. Now, she owned them all. The air in the boardroom was thick with shock and disbelief. Brian Peterson, who had mocked Martha just hours earlier, sat rigid in his chair, gripping the armrests as if to steady himself in a reality he couldn't comprehend. His mind raced, trying to recall every word, every sneer, every offhand comment he had made. How could he have been so blind? Martha, standing before them, was no longer the woman they had ignored or dismissed. She held their futures in her hands, and everyone in that room knew it. The cold corporate world they had built around themselves suddenly felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter at the slightest touch. "Let me be clear," Martha said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "This company will no longer tolerate the kind of arrogance and disregard I've seen here. You've forgotten what it means to respect the people who make this place run. Well, that changes now." William Sanders, who had quietly watched the drama unfold, nodded in agreement. It was clear that this moment had been planned long in advance, that he and Martha had been working together behind the scenes, preparing for this reveal. He wasn't the typical hard-nosed CEO the board had feared. He was a man with a vision that included people like Martha, who had earned their place through resilience and strength. The executives remained frozen. Some whispered to each other in disbelief, while others stared at Martha with humbled eyes. But it was Brian who finally spoke up, his voice shaky and uncertain. "Miss Davis," he stammered. I had no idea." Martha's gaze turned cold as she looked directly at him, her expression unreadable. "No, you didn't," she said calmly. "But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? You didn't care to know. You saw me, but you didn't see me. You never asked who I was or why I was here. All you saw was a uniform, and that's why you'll be the first to go." Brian's face paled. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice cracking. Martha looked him straight in the eye, her tone unwavering. "You're fired, Brian. Effective immediately." The room erupted in murmurs as Brian sat back, his hands trembling. This was the same man who had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, cutting down anyone who stood in his way. Now, in a matter of minutes, everything he had worked for was gone. "This is a wake-up call for all of you," Martha continued, addressing the entire board. "I may have started at the bottom, but I built my way to the top. I bought this company piece by piece, and now I own the majority of it. Summit Enterprises is going to change, and if you can't adapt, you're welcome to leave." Her words hung in the air, a final warning to the remaining executives. Those who had spent years building walls of superiority around themselves now realized those walls had crumbled. Rachel, standing near the back, felt a wave of admiration for Martha. She had come into the company with high hopes, but had quickly seen the toxic culture that pervaded its ranks. Now, she saw the beginning of a new chapter, and she knew she wanted to be part of it. Martha turned toward William Sanders, who gave her a knowing nod. "Thank you, William, for believing in me when no one else did," she said, her voice softer now. William smiled, his respect for Martha clear. "It's not hard to believe in someone as strong and determined as you," he replied. "This company needed a leader like you, Martha. Someone who knows what it means to work for something, to earn it." Martha looked around the room one last time, meeting the eyes of each executive. "This is your opportunity," she said firmly. "You can stay and be part of something better, or you can leave. But either way, things are going to be different from now on." With that, she turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind a trail of stunned faces. The power dynamics had shifted in an instant, and everyone knew it. Rachel followed her out, her heart pounding. She caught up to Martha in the hallway. "Miss Davis," she began, her voice full of respect. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." Martha paused, turning to look at the young woman. She smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "You don't have to thank me, Rachel. Just remember one thing. Never let anyone tell you your worth. You decide that." Rachel nodded, her admiration for Martha deepening. She knew she had just witnessed something remarkable, a moment that would change not only the company, but her own life as well. As Martha walked out of the office, the city of Orlando sprawled out before her. The skyline, with its towering buildings and bustling streets, felt different today. It wasn't just a city of glass and steel anymore. It was a place where anyone, no matter where they came from, could rise to the top if they had the strength to persevere. And as for Summit Enterprises, They'd never forget the day they laughed at Martha Davis, the cleaning lady who, it turned out, owned it all. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.